What's up, Wrestling World? This is Andy Perez with 411mania.com, and you are watching Dissecting Dynamite. And even though Full Gear is over, we are just getting started here. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment down in the chats. Tell us what you thought about tonight's episode of Dynamite. We would love to know. And joining me again this week to follow up on the Full Gear predictions we made on the 411 On Wrestling podcast, the host of the 411 On Wrestling podcast, Mr. Blake Lovell. Blake, what did you think about that show, and what did you think about Full Gear?
Yeah, Andy, good to be back as always. Man, Full Gear was something,
Oh my
wasn't it? It
gosh.
was quite a show. And what do you know? We build off of that with a pretty wild episode of Dynamite. And again, remember the theme going into it. If you were on social media, it was all about the surprise. And I would say that we certainly got the surprise by the end of the
And I don't know if the
night.
viewers can see those goosebumps there. We're not streaming in 4K, but I don't want to spoil the end of Dissecting Dynamite tonight, but I just have to because the bastard is back. Pac is back in the game, and it looks like we are ready to go when it comes to this new chapter of Dynamite. If you want to hear Blake's full thoughts on Full Gear, you can do so on the last edition of the 411 On Wrestling podcast. And you can find that right here on the 411 Mania YouTube channel. But to start off, we started off with a slick new intro. A slick new intro package for AEW Dynamite. And that led us into Team Taz standing at the top of the stage, calling out Darby Allin in the rafters. In case you guys missed it, Darby Allin is the new TNT champion. Short, what did you think of that Cody Darby match? And now what do you see? What do you see here with the whole Darby Allin situation being the face of TNT?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of said it, didn't we, when we made our picks? Like I picked Darby Allin, I just thought it was the right time. I mean, we think about, the matches they've had before, the story that they built into it. It just seemed like you couldn't have Darby lose again to Cody in that big of a spot. And so I can't say I was shocked by the fact that he won. I thought the match was really good. I thought the way they finished it was also really good because you had Cody pretty much throughout playing up just sort of those heel type of
Mm-hmm.
things that we've always talked about, Andy. Like he's just like at some point this guy is going to be a heel and he's going to be someone who's going to be great at it because he's just playing up those tiny little nuances along the way. And we saw that here. You even had Arn, getting frustrated at Cody when he's doing the push-ups and all this other stuff. And so I thought it was a really good match. And now with Darby, I mean, we're seeing where it's headed, which we'll talk about in a second. I was hoping it was going to head the direction in terms of who his likely next opponent's probably going to be. So I think it's a good kind of fresh start now, and it gives you a lot more opportunity of what you can do, I think, with
Right,
Darby.
and we're kind of throwing it up in the air because we have two likely opponents here. We have the
Yep.
Machine, Brian Cage, and then we have Ricky Starks. And at the top of the show here, we have Brian Cage versus Matt Seidel and a classic David versus Goliath match. And both of these guys are just so impressive. Cage just such an imposing force in the ring. Great back and forth action. Saw an awesome trapped arm belly to belly suplex. Bicep curls into a fall away slam, and then on Seidel's end we have these great scrappy strikes. Some amazing high flying with that crazy meteora out to the outside of the ring. But what did you think about this match, Brian Cage versus Matt Seidel, kicking off the first Dynamite after Full Gear? And everybody watching at home, make sure you leave a comment in the chat. Tell us what you thought about this first match.
Yeah, I thought it was a good match, and I think we remember back. People were pointing out on Twitter and such. We remember back to the match they had at what was it, Slammiversary? I think
Mm-hmm.
2018. These two went up against each other. So yeah, I think you had some callbacks to that, and then I just think Brian Cage. We've talked about this. Like we think about kind of where he came in. He won that match to get the shot at Moxley. And I think ever since then, it's not as though he's sort of been an afterthought because he has been such a big part, of Team Taz. But I think they've kind of just been waiting for that next big thing for him. And it feels like this may be it as we head towards, this what we're going to get. Like we said, next week, we know we're getting Cody and Darby against Cage and Starks. I feel like the best direction of that is going to be Cage versus Cody and then Starks versus Darby. Now, it could be different. You could have the other way around. I don't know, but I really like I love Cage and Starks together as part of this Team Taz thing. Everyone knows like I'm a huge Ricky Starks fan, but I just think that it's going to open up a lot of possibilities of what they can do here. I thought this was a good match, though, overall. I mean, when you think about it, like I thought this was maybe better than some people expected just because of the difference in styles. But I think Brian Cage has kind of proven that he can work with anybody. Like I feel like we've seen that in everything he's done. So I thought this was actually a pretty good start.
Right, and that's the thing. Brian Cage, like you said, no slouch in the ring, and just that those final moments of the match, Brian Cage literally catching Matt Seidel out of the air in a vertical suplex formation and hitting his finisher to get the win. But like you were saying, I mean, where do we see Cage going? You think he's going up against Cody? Because like it's obvious that he's no slouch in the ring, but he hasn't really developed much of a character outside of that. Team Taz, otherwise, I mean, you have Ricky Starks there being in my opinion, the highlight of Team Taz. And then we saw a little bit at Full Gear and a little bit more tonight. Both Ricky Starks and Brian Cage are ranked in the top 5 right now, and both of them want that TNT title. We saw maybe a little bit of a schism in between Team Taz, between Ricky Starks and Brian Cage at Full Gear. Do you see that developing much more leading into this TNT title situation?
Well, think about it. And I think I always say what AEW does really well is they blend all this stuff together where they have multiple stories going at once. And I think we brought that up before. And like watching Dynamite, like we see it every week. Like they somehow figure out a way to kind of tie in multiple stories into, the same match or the same segment. And I feel like that's what you can do here because even though I brought up saying that I think it'll probably be Cage versus Cody and then maybe Darby versus, Starks to start off with, you could see this thing playing out to where they had all these different, like you could do Cage versus Cage, or excuse me, Cody versus Cage. Then you could do Cody versus Starks. Like you can do Darby versus Cage, Darby versus Starks. Like you've got a lot of different ways you can go here. And then of course Will Hobbs.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're bringing Will Hobbs into the mix now. So you have to assume, like we've seen Hobbs versus Cage before, and I thought those were like that's been fun to watch that match that they had not too long ago. And then, of course, you can still do Hobbs versus Starks. Like, there's so many ways you can go with this. I'm very curious kind of how Will Hobbs going to factor into the mix because we think back, they put him in such a prominent spot. We remember, like, during the Moxley and Archer feud. And then, of course, that's when, they set up that 6-man tag, but then Archer had to be, he's quarantined for a couple weeks, and so they had to cancel that. And so I'm very curious to see kind of what they do with Will Hobbs too, and maybe how he factors into the mix here, because I don't think he's going to be the one that's going to be challenging for the title or anything anytime soon. But at least they're putting him in a spot where he's surrounded by Cody, he's surrounded by Darby, arguably 2 of your biggest stars. So clearly they have high hopes for what Will can do too.
Most definitely, and we saw him get inserted into this feud even more so, helping in with the post match attack, helping with the save there. But that leads us into the next segment of the night. We have the former TNT champion out on the stage, and even if Cody's just out there to cut a promo, don't worry, he still has $5,000 worth of pyro in his entrance. And even though Cody doesn't have the strap on his shoulder anymore, he has a last name now. So congrats for Cody. But this segment was all over the place. This segment was crazy. This segment was crazy cuckoo banana pants. This segment was you can describe this segment in any way you want. All I know is that I don't think I was that crazy about it. We're speaking about it short, but Cody comes out, says he doesn't necessarily want to chase after a rematch with Darby. Instead, he wants to focus his efforts on MJF of all people. But then we have a quote-unquote mystery woman come into the ring. We've seen her standing in the crowd during episodes of Dynamite, during episodes of Dark, Jade Cargill, but she's been sitting aside for weeks, as noticed on social media. And she comes out and tears Cody a new one. What did you think about this segment here?
Yeah, it was different, I think, than we expected. Like that's what we talk about. I guess if you want to say unpredictable, when this segment started, I did not think we were going to get to where we got to with it. I will say that. So if you're going for the unpredictability factor, you got me on that one because I never thought this was the direction we'd be going in a million years. But um, you and I kind of talked about this, Andy, as we were watching the show. I have never been a big fan of these, celebrity type matches. I guess just of any kind. Like there are probably some, like I said, if you go way back, there are probably some that I enjoyed, like the WCW with Rodman and
Mhm.
Malone, and I guess you could go back to LT versus Bam Bam, WrestleMania and all those other stuff. But I've just never been a huge fan of these, and it seems like at least that's where they're heading with Cody versus Shaq. It's strange to say that right now that could be actually the direction they're going in. But I will say this: I know a lot of people enjoyed it just being on Twitter, but I also will say I understand why promotions do this because NBA has a big audience. Shaq is a big part of TNT. He's a big part of the NBA on TNT. That show, which is always one of the highest rated shows there is when you talk about just sports, like broadcast shows minus games and stuff. That group, everybody knows. And so if you're able to bring over that crossover audience, I assume that's the same reason like WWE, when we think back to their SmackDown on Fox debut, when you brought out Cain Velasquez and all that. I could not have cared less about a Cain Velasquez versus Brock Lesnar wrestling match, being the fact that, they had already fought in UFC. Like, why do I want to see them have a wrestling match? I don't. It's the same with Cody versus Shaq. Like, I don't care anything about the actual match, probably. They may sell me to the point that I do. I'll watch it because it'll be a spectacle. But I just, it's different for different people. And I'm just one of those that says I see why they do it. But at the same time, like, is it going to be anything more than just sort of I'll say this, like it feels like a WWE type match, right? Because it's like you have that big, whatever, you have the celebrity presence and all that, but I don't know. Like again, it's just I get why AEW would do it. They want to grow their audience, and this would be a way to do it by having Shaq promote something like
And it
this.
looks like we have a tad bit of disagreement with you over in the chat. First of all, we have Jonas back again this week. Hello, Jonas. Thanks for joining us. Jonas chiming in saying that I believe he must be talking about either Jade or Brandy or maybe even Cody, saying that they're not the best talker. But we have wannabe trout fishers coming in right underneath. With about five or six exclamation points saying Shaq, Shaq. So at least somebody's excited for it. But in case you're not in the know, we had Jade come out, insult Cody, say he says he's the giant killer. You know nothing about giants. There's not a single giant thing about him. Pro wrestling and penis humor. It's a bond that'll never be broken.
Yep.
But
Yep.
there will be a giant that'll be awakened by Cody, and that giant is of course Shaq. But then after that massive, earth-shattering announcement, we have Brandy coming out and defending her man, calling Jade every single name in the book, calling her a ratchet, saying she's trifling, saying she's a heifer, saying she's a bitch. And thankfully
Yep.
Jerry Lynn was there to break up what was sure to be a slobber knocker between the two. And like you said before, we had Cage coming in, ending the segment by attacking Cody, who was of course helped by Will Hobbs and Darby Allin, but quite a segment. I If anything, AEW is going to end up on ESPN tomorrow, so that's something.
Right. See, and that's the thing is I know that like there are going to be people that enjoy this. And look, I mean, there are people that are going to say, I would love to see Shaq
There's
in a
people
wrestling
right
match in
here in this
2020.
chat saying that.
Exactly. Like people are gonna like some people will enjoy this, and that's fine. Because look, if you go into it knowing that it's not gonna be like you're not expecting, Omega and Page here, like you're not expecting a 5-star classic in the Tokyo Dome or anything. I don't think Dave Meltzer's gonna give this 5 stars, but at the same time, it again, you're trying to add to your audience. You're trying to bring a different audience in that maybe has never seen your product before. So why not give it a chance and see what you can do? And look, they brought in Tyson. Like we think back to the Jericho Tyson thing. Like they would have, I assume they would have done that at some point. Maybe they go back to it eventually down the road. But I don't know. Like it's again, I completely 100% understand why they did it. I do think Brandy Rhodes here. I think, like I said on Twitter, a pissed off Brandy Rhodes is the best Brandy Rhodes. Like when she gets going and starts yelling at people, I'm all in at that point. So maybe Brandy will be able to sell this for me and just have me completely buy into the fact that we could see Cody and Brandy versus Jade and Shaq. Count me in for that one.
And we have Jonas in the chat completely agreeing with you. He says that Brandy saved the whole segment, and I can't say that I disagree because when Brandy came out with that intensity, wielding those insults like they were a heavy, heavy sword, and she was just slashing away, and it was entertaining. So I'd have to agree. But you mentioned Hangman versus Omega just a little bit. That leads us into the next segment. We had a quick recap of Hangman versus Omega. And you and I, we both predicted the outcome of this match. That didn't make this match any less amazing. That's the thing. What did you think about this match?
Yeah.
How do you see it affecting storylines moving forward, especially with Hangman Page, who was absent from this show?
Yeah, I think the Hangman thing that they did on being the elite this week, that certainly caught a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. They caught their attention, thinking, "Oh gosh, is Hangman going to join the Dark Order? Is he really going to be there with
They've
all
teased it
that?"
before.
I don't think that's going to happen. Exactly, they teased it before, and so I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to go to something like that for a little bit because here's what we know: like we know this Moxley versus Omega match is going to happen now on
Mm-hmm.
December the 2nd, and what do you do with Hangman until that point to where maybe he is a factor in this match in some way, shape, or form, or maybe it's not during this match, maybe it's after this match, because and that's a discussion we could have for an hour about who's going to win this match, where they go from here, and we can talk a little bit about probably a little bit more about that later when the Kenny promo, but. I think with Hangman, I'm just so fascinated by where they go, and that's why I thought Omega winning was the right call because the better story is what happens to Hangman because we said it like we remember that promo he did with JR about like this guy's like I have nothing but my beer. So if
Mm-hmm.
I don't win this match and get this title, what else do I have? And I just think that adds such a unique character dynamic now to where it's like, all right, where does this guy go from here? Because he's the outsider. He's not been in this situation before and what's next. And so I'm completely invested in what's next for this guy, and I'm very curious to see where they go from here and kind of what the next direction is. Because as we've said many times, and I'll repeat this again, like I think Moxley to Omega, we said it, that's the next big match. Then from there, I think it's Omega versus Page again for the title. At some point, it may not be, at the next pay-per-view after that, like, but some point down the road, whether that's 6 months from now, a year from now, maybe they do it again, Andy. Like maybe they do the 1 year thing. We went from Moxley and Omega like 1 year ago at Full Gear to now we got back to the match this year at Full Gear. Maybe it's a year from now we get to Omega versus Hangman just to complete that 3 year trifecta there. I don't know, but I'm very invested in where they go from here with him.
Exactly, exactly. Make sure if you're watching at home to let us know in the chat what you think is next for Hangman Page. We know what's next for Kenny Omega, and that's John Moxley, and that leads us into John Moxley's promo. John Moxley, he he said that he will never quit no matter what the challenge is ahead. He put that on display at Full Gear, defeating Eddie Kingston, and he sees what's ahead of him, and that is Kenny Omega. Moxley says that he's beaten Kenny Omega once before, and that's one thing, but it's a completely other thing to beat Kenny Omega twice. But John Moxley says that he is the best in the world, and that he is the special type of guy to defeat Kenny Omega twice in a row. And like you said, we're going to see that match live on December 2nd at Dynamite. We're not even waiting for Revolution. Where do you see this storyline and this match going between the two? I know you had some thoughts in regards to John Moxley possibly heading off to New Japan again. Why don't you let people into that?
Yeah, I think if you're playing this game about partnerships and AEW, and I mean, think about all the stuff we've seen. We've seen NWA now. We've seen Impact. I mean, we saw Tanahashi on the Jericho thing. Everybody said that's a one-time thing, but you even heard Kenny in his promo tonight, which we'll get to. He mentioned New Japan again. I think he even teased, he's got a flight to catch, and everybody's thinking, oh, is he heading to New Japan? Like, what's they doing? So I think that is going to continue to be a theme now. And even Tony Khan, I think in a recent interview he did, I don't remember who it was because Tony was on the interview circuit here lately. I think he did about 50 interviews in the past week. So he did mention something about New Japan, I think, and being more willing to work with them. Now that Harold May wasn't there anymore. So I'm very curious to see where they go because the talk has always been, even with Moxley being the world champion, it's like, okay, he still has this title in New Japan. And when is he going to be able to defend it? Who's he going to defend it against? I feel like because this match is on December the 2nd, if they say, all right, we're putting the belts on Omega here. This is a big, like, again, think about this, Andy. They're building this match. What is it? Is it 3 weeks or 3 weeks from now? I want to say, is that right? Because that would be, so that would be 3 weeks, I think, So 3 weeks from now, like, they're giving this a nice build. Like, they're going to want a huge rating for this match. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. There's no doubt about it. And so I wonder, like, do they just make the title switch there? And then maybe that gives you time. If you're going to get Moxley to New Japan at some point, I feel like that's the time to do it because then you could say, all right, you put him on a plane, you send him to Japan, he can work Wrestle Kingdom at the very first of the year. You have the 2-week quarantine thing. I mean, it all adds up. Like, I think the time adds up. Everything would make sense for them to do that because it is Wrestle Kingdom. It's the biggest show of the year for New Japan. It's a 2-night event. Like, they're going to want that title on the show, and they would want Moxley on that show, right? So, if we're just doing this from a speculation standpoint, there's a lot of dots that connect. But at the same time, there was a lot of dots that connected for Sting to show up at AEW for a year, and that didn't happen. So you know what? Let's maybe just our expectations. Let's keep them low. That way, if it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, then we're not disappointed.
And we might as well head right into the Kenny Omega promo. I know it's a little bit later in the show, but we have Ken back in the chat this week. Hello, Ken. Saying that he dug the subtle heel dig by Omega, saying that the prior match didn't count, that it was a hardcore match, and that he doesn't think Moxley can defeat him in a real wrestling match. And Ken also has some thoughts asking, does he think Hangman will get involved? Maybe unintentionally help Omega win the belt. And this was where I was coming from because, yes, Moxley can go to Japan, but think of the look of Japan, or think of the look of Moxley in Japan with the U.S. title on one shoulder and the AEW title on another shoulder. Say December 2nd does come around. Hangman interferes in that match. There's a screwy finish. Perhaps Moxley retains leading into February for AEW Revolution and a rematch between Omega and Moxley. So there are definitely many directions that we can go with this. But we had completely... once again, between the promos between Moxley and Omega, we had two sides of the same coin. Moxley saying he's beaten him once, and he's the type of guy that can beat him again. And Kenny saying, yeah, you've beaten me once, but it was in a lights out match. It was in a match that wasn't even on the record books. And once we're in between those ropes, once we're in between those four corners, you have no chance against me. You have no chance against Kenny Omega. So yeah, very, very interesting story going into this. And Ken, once again, back in the chat saying, yeah, it was an unsanctioned match. It wasn't even, not even on the books. But speaking of not even on the books, speaking of unsanctioned, speaking of no disqualification, that leads us into the next match of the night. We had a bunkhouse match, Butcher and the Blade versus Natural Nightmares. And in case you're confused, bunkhouse match is basically no DQ with rodeo merchandise around. And this was a, as JR would say, a bowling shoe ugly match. This was, what did you think of this match, Blake?
I made the joke on Twitter, and I think at least some people enjoyed it, so that's all that matters. There's probably some people didn't. I said instead of Abdullah the Butcher, I said Abdullah the Blade. That's kind of what it was, because He by the time this match was over, like that's what it felt like.
Oh
He
my
looked rough.
gosh.
Like Blade took a beating here. You talk about a blade job. That was a blade job. And I guess when your name's Blade, you better be pretty good at it. So, man, he got busted open, and it was he looked rough. But yeah, it was. I mean, we think back to that parking lot brawl, like this was similar but different. Like it wasn't to that level, but like it was different. It was the same because it was like a completely different sort of match than you're used to. Because I think that's what we talk about with the variety on AEW. Like this was just a bloody mess. Like this was something that was just it was. We think to the Moxley and Kingston match at Full Gear. Like this was even more than that. Like this was just blood everywhere. And yeah, it was, they delivered. I mean, you thought if you're going to bring back that tradition of having, a match like this, that's just basically a hardcore match where anything goes. They certainly did that, because you had, QT getting knocked open. And I thought it was interesting too. You have a Rhodes in a match, and he's not the one that's busted open. Like it's the other guys, right? It's good. Like I'm so used to Cody like blading after a promo, or Dusty. We remember back to Dusty. Like Dusty's forehead was just, oh my gosh. And so it's crazy to see a Rhodes match, and you don't have Dustin in there, just completely blood everywhere like he was with that match against Cody. But yeah, this was fun. I mean, it's not going to be fun for those two. For one was the blood. I mean, Blade and QT. It's not going to be fun for them because they're going to be hurting after this. But I thought this was fun. Like based on it raised to me, it brought these two teams up a notch because we've kind of seen them in that background. I don't want to say like background roles, but like they haven't been main featured attractions.
Background.
Right?
I don't think it's
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say. We've
Right.
had QT Marshall and Dustin on Dark, basically sweeping house against various jobber tag teams,
Yes.
making their way to the main show, and we have Butcher and Blade who have really proven themselves in a couple of hardcore matches, both this one and then that match that they had with the Young Bucks a couple months back. But yeah,
Yeah.
some really interesting spots throughout this match. Of course, we had a guitar hit. We had some suplexes through some chairs, which is always brutal. We had some handcuffs. We had a bulldog through some plywood, and then of course we had a massive top of the ladder elbow by QT Marshall. But yeah, this match, while ugly, was, like you said, incredibly enjoyable. And we have Jonas also in the chat saying that he liked the variety of plunder as well. When it comes to when it comes to variety, AEW is where it's at. And Ken Hill in the chat kind of ragging on some predictions, saying that he knows a lot of people pegged the Butcher and the Blade to win, but considering that they rushed the turn for Allie for unknown reasons, her getting her comeuppance out of the way was best for the best. Do we think that this is the end of the feud? Obviously, going into this match, Bunny maxed out QT Marshall's cards, left him hanging dry, and since then, Butcher and the Blade have just been jumping the natural nightmares. Do you think this puts a definitive end to this mini feud between these two teams, or do we think there's more to be seen?
I would hope so, just because when you have one of these matches, you have one of these blood matches. I mean, that's what we're used to, right? Like that's the old school way. And I feel like for Dustin, someone like that, like I feel like this would be the way you would want it. Like you don't start with this blood match, like you end with the blood match, and maybe revisit this down the line. But yeah, I thought. You had Allie or Bunny, getting involved in this, and like she was just in there, like right in the middle of the action. I thought that was good. So I feel like this was a blow off type thing because I don't really think it feels like to me. And look, I will admit, I know there's some others and probably some, like we said, that have been invested in this whole QT, Allie thing. I was never there. Like I just was never
Mm-hmm.
that invested in this thing. And I don't know that it was because I didn't care about them, but it was just like the story was just everywhere. Like we didn't really know where it was going. And then all of a sudden it just stopped. So it's hard to get invested in something like that. Like you just don't really, I don't know. Like I just was never really invested as a whole. So when they did the whole split without really saying anything, I was like, whatever. I didn't really think it was going anywhere anyways. So I feel like this is probably it in terms of maybe where they go from here. And then I mean, look, if we talk about, QT and Dustin, but like their record now warrants them being in a spot to where at some point, like they're gonna have to challenge for the titles maybe because they're winning all their matches. So I don't know, maybe we do see that a situation where maybe they face the Bucks at some point down the road.
Yeah, yeah, and as Jonas is saying in the chat, Blade, of course, going to be dizzy after this match with the amount of blood that he lost, but
Yes.
he has Pac to look forward to for next week,
Yeah.
and it sure as hell will not be pretty for the Blade. Blade looking a little bit dull after this match, and I'm sure after next week, I don't know if he'll be anything more than a knife handle. I don't think he'll even be a blade anymore. But we'll see. We'll see. That remains to be seen. But when it comes to the ending of feuds, that leads us to the recap package for the Matt Hardy Sammy Guevara feud, and their match this past weekend at Full Gear. I know I've been particularly critical of Matt Hardy in the past. I know wannabe trout fishers in the chat tonight may not be very, very happy with me, but I didn't really see this recap being super necessary. We've had recaps like this for the tag title match for Hangman and Omega, but we didn't get any recap of the women's championship match. We didn't get any recap.
Yeah. Where was Sheeta? Like she wasn't even on the show at all,
Exact
right? Like she's a champion. Where was she?
exactly. So why take up time with this recap between Matt Hardy and Sammy Guevara when you have a victorious champion and
Yeah.
and her opponent Nyla Rose and Vicky Guerrero, their ongoing storyline both being dropped again this week, which was a bit disappointing. We'll get into that more when we talk about the women's match later tonight.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's the end of the Sammy and Matt rivalry, just in time for Sammy to start getting pissed off at MJF again. What are your final closing thoughts on Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara as we hopefully forget about it forever?
Yes, hopefully it is deleted. I think that's the best way to put it. I'll be surprised. I mean, honest with you, like I was surprised that Sammy was back on the show. I said it in the review I did. I thought leaving him off the show would be the best way because I mean the guy got stuffed in a trash can and like he was just completely destroyed. But we have to remember too, it's a different universe, right? So Sammy can come back and he's in this
Mm-hmm.
universe, so he's not in the broken universe. Although it was a little less broken this time, it felt a little more real. But yeah, I think that I mean, look, it's over. I just they're never going back to this. I don't imagine unless way down the road. This was pretty much as definitive as it could get in terms of this match. I know some people. I didn't think this was the best Matt Hardy match we've seen in that type of style. It just felt I don't know. It just didn't have that extra punch that we were used to probably from some of
Mm-hmm.
these matches. Like if you go back and watch the Impact ones, like those were on another level to this. But I mean, I don't know that we should have expected that either. Like it just felt like it was one that, I don't really think there was a whole lot to it. It lasted probably a little long than people wanted, but like you said, the feud's over, and now Sammy's got to worry about catching his flight to Las Vegas.
And we have wannabe trout fishers in the chat sticking his tail in between his legs saying, yeah, yeah, Blake, deleted. Um, wannabe trout fishers, I know we pick on you, but we love you. Thanks for coming back week in and week out.
Yes.
But yeah, speaking of Sammy Guevara, speaking of the inner circle, as Ken mentioned in the chat between Sammy and MJF, we have MJF's induction into the inner circle up next. We start with a hilarious opening video package as if we're heading into a Hall of Fame induction ceremony here. And then we have Inner Circle coming out to do the induction. Ortiz is looking pissed. Sammy Guevara is missing. Jake Hager looks like Jake Hager usually does, kind of like a mix between Andre the Giant and Humpty Dumpty. And and but yeah, what did you think of this segment? We had some gold here from MJF that I would like to quote, but first I want to hear your thoughts on the segment.
Yeah, MJF going full Drake here. That was not something that I expected either, in terms of him going that route. But you gotta love the guy, right? And that's the thing about these segments. Like, I don't care. Like, they're all not going to be the musical. They're not all going to be perfect. They're not all going to be the best segment in wrestling history. But they're just entertaining. I think that's the thing. And like, the thing is we feel like we're watching that sort of train and like it's just going along, it's going along, and you're like, uh-oh, I see something up there where this thing's about to swerve in the other direction. And like that's what we were watching with this whole MJF and Jericho and Inner Circle thing. Like at some point we know this thing's about to veer off, and we don't know when that's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be the instigator that gets it there, but you know it's coming, and you know it's going to get there at some point. And that's why I think I get invested in this because look, you're going to have hits, you're going to have misses with these segments that they do. Like even what was it? What was the thing they just recently did with the Bischoff and Baker? Like they're asking the questions. Was that
the town hall address.
Yeah, the town hall, right? It all runs together now, but like it was okay. Like it wasn't a musical. We didn't expect it to be, but like it wasn't anything just completely earth shattering. But I think that's the fun of this is you're going to get these little teases. You're going to get, Sami being in a situation where it's like, okay, well, when is Sami going to turn or who's going to turn? And I think you add all that in and it makes it entertaining.
Most definitely, most definitely. We have some people down in the chat speaking on their favorite moments from this segment. If you're watching at home, make sure you go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about the MJF induction ceremony. While you're at it, why don't you go ahead and give us a like? Why don't you go ahead and subscribe? But Ken is saying that his favorite part was the failed birthday surprise with the confetti and the balloons being blown all the way to downtown Jacksonville, is what JR said. Jonas saying, Drake started from the bottom and now MJF is here. My personal favorite line was right off the get-go, MJF saying, after 5 long years and a small $1 million loan, I have somehow made it where I am today. MJF, oh gosh, the amount of charisma, the amount of just amazing one-liners that we hear on a week-in, week-out basis. And of course, him being paired with Jericho is just going to be a dream going forward. We saw some obvious disarray within the inner circle. Ortiz maybe blowing up a bit, and Jericho not being quite as selfish as he usually is, saying no, don't focus on MJF. Don't give the blame to MJF. It's me. Yeah. I'm the one that lost, and we're going to have to come together. And kind of barking orders at Ortiz, saying we're going to. He's not asking him if he wants to get along. He's saying we are going to get along, and that leads into next week. We have the Inner Circle in Vegas, setting us up for what could be possibly another musical. Maybe a big Hangover-esque sequence. I mean,
yes.
There are so many directions that this could take. If you're watching at home, leave a comment. Let us know what you want to happen when the Inner Circle visits Vegas. But Blake, what do you want to see next week? I know neither of us are huge fantasy bookers, but let's put on our booker hats. And what's going to happen next week?
All right, hear me out. You brought up what I was going to bring up, Hangover. Think about this. Mike Tyson, right? Like we've the Tyson thing. You've got all these possibilities here. We've already had Tyson and Jericho. You send these guys to Vegas. You do the Hangover style. You bring Tyson back with the piano, the tiger. I think there is so many things you can do here, and I'm all in on this segment because I hope this is the route they go, and I feel like you're going to have people already saying that, like, oh, they're going to Vegas, like Jericho, Tyson, like bring back the tiger, like do all the Hangover stuff. I'm fine with that. Like just copy it completely if you want to. I don't care. Like I just want to see them do something of this magnitude, and I think, as some people brought up, I think my friend Sami is probably not going to be there. I have a feeling MJF's going to send him to Albuquerque or somewhere like that instead of Las Vegas. Yeah, like he's going to send him off somewhere. But hopefully Sami gets to make it. But I think they could go full Hangover style here because I feel like Hangover is replayed on TNT more than any other movie like ever. So I feel like they've got no choice but to go with Hangover style here in this Las Vegas thing.
Yeah, and we have some more fantasy booking down in the chat. We have Jonas asking, what does Vegas look like now with COVID? Is it a realistic Vegas? Them just turning That's up in Sin City and it's just deserted. Ken saying he wants to see MJF, Jericho, and Showgirls. Maybe another musical sequence there. And then we have Jonas chiming in again saying Sami is going to have some third-class accommodations while the rest of them are up in first class. I can see Sami down in the bunker where they keep all the luggage. Next to a caged dog or something of that nature. But yeah, there are so many possibilities here. But the big question is if they're doing the Hangover, who's Zach Galifianakis?
Yeah, like I feel like it's got to be like Ortiz, right? Like maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's Ortiz or maybe Jericho. Like one of those two. You feel like they could really play this up and try to be that guy. I don't think it's going to be Wardlow. I think Wardlow is going to be. I don't know who Wardlow would be. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'm not sure. That would be a fun thing to do. Like play the who's going to play the characters in this if they go Hangover style here. I think would be pretty good for sure.
Most definitely, most definitely, and we have that to look forward to next week. But up next we had a short recap of the tag title match, and you and I both kind of ragged on the storytelling leading into this match between FTR and the Young Bucks. But gosh, we're stupid because 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 this match was amazing.
Somebody's gonna play that on loop here at some point. Somebody's gonna get a screen cap of that or whatever they do, and they're gonna play that back on
Oh,
Twitter.
see, and they have full permission to at this point because this was, in my opinion, match of the night. Between this and Kingston and Moxley, I keep going back and forth, but but yeah, just a crazy match. And then we had a quick promo with the Young Bucks, and once again a bit of a not completely agreeing with each other on what the next step is. We have Nick saying, "Yeah, people are looking forward to a rematch," and then we have Matt butting in saying, "Oh no, we want some new blood, we want some new opponents," and that's looking forward into next week as they face off against Top Flight. Uh, how do you see the Young Bucks story going forward? Obviously, they're not completely on the same page. In addition to that, there's an injury amongst the team. They still have some moral issues going on with the way that they've been treating some commentary and interview staff at AEW. What do the people at home think is next with the Young Bucks? Make sure you leave a comment as well as like and subscribe. But Blake, where do you see the Young Bucks going?
I tell you, I don't know. Like, I don't know where this thing goes. And I think that was part of the problem going into that match with FTR. We were like, we don't know where this thing's headed. But like you said, that match was awesome. Like, it was just, it was much better than I thought it would be. The match told the story, and I pointed that out. If the build's not great, the match has got to tell the story. And they did that there. Like, they completely did that 100% in that match. But yeah, I'm very curious because, even this week on BTE, you had Nick calling Matt, basically saying, what a moron, like, you're stupid. Why did you put the stipulation into play? And then, Matt had it was great pulling out the picture of the TNT tag title. It's like, I got an idea. But I don't know. And that's something I keep thinking about. Like, they're not going to split the Young Bucks. Like, something I just don't think you can do. Because merchandise. I mean, come on, these guys got a book coming out. They got all kinds of stuff. But I'm very curious though what they're gonna do because we saw them like they balanced this face heel type thing to this point where I think winning that match, like they're back to being the Bucks. Like they're just back to being this. Like, you're gonna root for them. But I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't know where they go with this whole storyline. But I think the match against Top Flight, I think it's gonna be pretty fun because. AEW Dark, of course, which I review every week for 411. Like Top Flight's had a couple matches now, and they've looked pretty good. Like they even got a win on this week's Dynamite. So that's how you know that they look at you as saying, okay, you're getting a win as an unsigned talent. You're in a pretty good spot, and so I think that's going to be a good match. Top Flight. I want to say both those guys in Top Flight are like 20, 19. Like they're young, very young, but. They've got like that style, like they could be ones 5 years from now that we're saying, oh boy, like this is the next coming of like this next really great tag team. So that's a match I would circle. Any Young Bucks match I know you want to watch, but Top Flight's pretty impressive, so that could be pretty fun next week.
Most definitely, most definitely. A lot of people looking forward to that match between the Young Bucks and Top Flight. We have a bit of chat going on in the comment section. Jonas saying that up until the stipulation was in place, he thought it would be FTR winning and then trying to duck out of a rematch for months. Obviously not the case now. Then we have Ken coming around saying that the Indian was more about FTR making that momentary mistake, saying, hey, we are about flips tonight apparently, making that mistake and then costing themselves a couple of tag titles because of it. We didn't see FTR tonight. I thought we would have some sort of follow-up with the story, maybe Tully digging into them or something of that nature. but where FTR is and whether there's some issues between that team there, I mean there has to be.
Yeah.
That was an
Yeah.
extreme mistake, and somebody's got to pay for it. Where do you see FTR going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we know. I've got to think we're going to get to this eventual rematch between those two. Um, could they do it at Revolution? I mean, think back. Like we look at AEW, like the one match that is always on our minds is the Revolution tag match from this year. Could they do that again and basically say, all right, we're going to try to top this? But I think the problem with trying to do that match so close together is you're almost like, it's sort of that recency bias too, where it's like, man, this match they just had at Full Gear was great. And I almost feel like you let that one kind of have its time for a while before you rush back to that next match between the Young Bucks and FTR. Because otherwise, it's just going to turn into a comparison thing where it's like people are going to start knocking the Full Gear match, saying, "Well, I don't know if it was that good based on this next one." I think you just kind of leave it be right now. But as we said, though, I don't know who you put the Young Bucks against next in terms of maybe that next big title feud either. So I don't know. Like it's hard to call, but I guess that's part of the story. Like we said, it's been hard to call this whole way with what they're doing. Maybe they still don't know 100% where they're going down the line, but I don't know. Like FTR, I feel like they're ones that are going to have to just. I don't think you can all of a sudden just put FTR in a situation where they're back just sort of in that middle of the tag division, just out there having matches. Like I feel like they're too big of a team to put in that spot. Like you're going to have to put them. They're going to have to be featured no matter what. Because they feel like they're a level above some of these other teams. Look, I love Jurassic Express, but they're a team you can put in that middle of the card that can fight anyone, and you're still going to say, I love Jurassic Express, right? They're still ones that they can get by being in that spot because they're different, they're unique. FDR is different and unique too, but like they're about the title. Like that's what their whole thing is. Like we want to be the champion. We want to be the best in the world. So I feel like they have to be in that picture going forward, even if it's not an immediate rematch right away.
Most definitely, most definitely. I don't know where they're going next, so if you guys in the comments know, make sure you leave a comment. Tell us what you think the next big match for the Young Bucks is. Tell us where does FTR go from there. And while you're at it, why don't you give us a like and why don't you subscribe? But that leads us into the next match. We've had this match building on AEW Dark for what feels like a millennia. Sean Spears versus Scorpio Sky going 1-on-1. You commented that this match has been going on ever since you started reviewing AEW Dark a few months ago.
Yes.
What did you think of the? It doesn't look like the conclusion because it ended in a bit of a scraggly way. What did you think about this face-off between Spears and Sky?
Yeah, I think this is like one of those matches that's like made for their next TV show. Like, because, if they add this next hour or whatever it is, whatever the show is going to be, they've already said it's not going to be AEW Dark. So if they add this other hour of TV somewhere on TNT, like, I feel like this is the kind of match you can push in a way that it gets the time, like, it gets enough time to be like in that main event slot of that show, rather than just kind of being where it was at on this show. I feel like that's what it's made for. Because on this show, we know we're going to get to Penta versus Phoenix. Like we know what we've already seen thus far. I just feel like it just feels like another match, even though they built this up. So, they built it up for a while. I mean, yeah, it does feel like it's been going on for a while. Of course, it got, delayed from last week and all that. But I just feel like it's one that's been going on for a while. And there's just still something, honestly, Andy, about both of them that I look at and say, I just still feel like there's something missing with whether it's the character presentation. I mean, they're both solid wrestlers. Like I don't disagree with that at all. I think a lot of people very high on Scorpio Sky. Obviously like his ability. Sean Spears, he's had fans forever. He's playing a different, kind of style and character in AEW, but I still just feel like though there's just something about this whole feud that they've had. Like I can't say I've been completely invested in this because it feels like a secondary feud because like it's just sort of treated as such, and that's fine. But I don't know. Like I just feel like this was the kind of match that would be great on that second TV show because they would get more time. They would probably be the main event in that type of setting. But I think here it just felt like another match on this show to me.
Most definitely got lost in the mix a bit. Speaking of second show, we have a new viewer down in the comment section saying, "Deaton, the Pokemon YouTube master, welcome. Thanks for viewing." Saying that they didn't think AEW was that great tonight. They wanted to see Jungle Boy. Maybe once that second hour does come around, Jungle Boy will have more exposure. And also having some questions with Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, good guy, bad guy, remains to be seen, but who knows? But in terms of the Spears and Scorpio Sky match, yeah, it got lost in the mix a little bit. Started a bit slow, but then a couple brutal spots. We had I believe it was a sidewalk slam
Yeah.
on the steel steps, and then ending with what did they call it? It was like a sheet of metal, a slug.
Yeah, the slug.
Yeah,
That's what. Yeah.
had a slug slipped in by Tully, and he got a slug right in the face. And Scorpio Sky was down for the 3 count because of that. Ken seemed to enjoy the match, say it was fun, impactful, and the finish with Tully and the metal slug leaves things open enough for a rematch down the line. Uh,
Yeah.
if that's the case, is the rematch going to be a no DQ match? A lot of the times, that's what
Yeah.
happens whenever there's a little squiggly finish, like there was tonight with the slug. Um, I'm not too hot on this feud right now. Whether or not it's extended going forward, it remains to be seen. But that leads us into the next segment. We already spoke on the Kenny Omega promo a little bit, so we are on to Ty Conti versus Red Velvet. What did you think about this match before we go into our thoughts on the state of the AEW Women's Division as it stands right now?
I thought this was better than I thought it
Mm-hmm.
would be, and I thought they gave him more time than I thought they would give him. I'll say that, and maybe that was the biggest part of it, because they work through the
Mm-hmm.
commercial, the picture in picture, as Jr. likes to say. Boy, Jr. loves his picture in picture. But yeah, they worked through that, and I thought it really was like I thought you had some good offense. I think Conti's got some good offense. Like I think her kicks, which her background too. I mean, Jr. always brings it up. Talks about that jiu-jitsu style and just sort of that MMA type background. Like I feel like there's a lot there, and I think that's what makes her like she. I think you put her in the top 5 right now, probably on the AEW women's roster, just in terms of like what she can do, like her actual like technical skill and that type of stuff. We just haven't seen it enough yet. Like I just feel like she just hasn't really been featured a whole lot. So maybe a lot of people just still. I mean, people know who she is, but I don't know. Not having her on Dynamite every week, that's different, and so you don't have that same element as you would like on Dark or something. But I think Red Velvet too. Like she's someone who, from the very beginning, like you talk about, AEW Dark. When you started watching her, you're like, look, she's got something. Like she certainly has potential, and I think
Mm-hmm.
we've seen her get better and better. Like in the matches she's had on Dark, and now in this match, like there's still work to be done for both. But at the same time, like I thought this was actually pretty good, given the time they had and what they were able to do. Yeah, I was really impressed with Conti here. I thought she is someone that they can certainly build off of because she's got some awesome kicks that she does. And I mean, there were a couple times where you and I, Andy, we're watching this thing and we're like, oh my
Oh,
goodness, like she just smacked her in the face with some of these kicks, and I'm like, that had to hurt. So
yeah. Some of the offense in this match was stiff. We had Conti with an amazing pump kick right to Red Velvet's face while
yeah,
she was on her knees. And then led into that sick go to sleep variant that she uses as a finisher. We have wannabe trout fishers down in the chat agreeing with us, saying that Conti looked like a great talent tonight.
yeah,
But yeah, I enjoyed this match too, and I really want to see more of Ty Conti, and a bit of storyline progression here for Conti as well.
yeah.
Didn't take the steel chair that was slid into her, almost cost her the match, and there was obviously a bit of disagreement there at the end. Maybe she's not Dark Order material. It seems like she's possibly being looked at for the Dark Order. We saw members of the Dark Order down in the tunnels watching at the end of the match, but still, Ty Conti comes out victorious without cheating. Uh, who says she even needs the Dark Order at this point with what we saw her do in this match? Thankfully, a little bit of storyline progression there, but like we said earlier in Dissecting Dynamite, Nothing to do with the AEW Women's Champion Shida. Nothing to do with Nyla Rose or Vicky Guerrero when it comes to the progression of that storyline. We've expressed our frustration with the AEW Women's Division and the lack of build in it in episodes in the past. I'd like to know what the people in the comments think of the current state of the AEW Women's Division. Make sure you let us know, as well as like and subscribe. But we saw Tony Khan, like you said, in the media circuits, take responsibility for the lack of build between Shida and Nyla Rose this past pay-per-view. Where do you see the women's division right now, and do you see it getting any better? Because we haven't seen any indication that there will be improvements when we're looking at this show, at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I said this to someone. Someone commented today on the AEW Dark review on 411 and brought up a good point about how AEW is like really just stacking the tag team like roster, like, right? I mean, they just signed Max Caster and Anthony Bowens. They're the Acclaim now. Like, they're added to the tag team roster. It seems like Top Flight could eventually be signed. I don't know, down the line. We could see that too, and we're not seeing that on the women's side, right? We're not seeing anyone that seemingly, Red Velvet, I guess at this point she's signed, and they've added people like Conti and such, but like, think about, I don't know, like Allison Kay, who I thought Serena Deeb and Allison Kay had a really nice match on the buy-in at Full
Great
Gear.
match,
Like,
yeah.
I thought that match was pretty good. Yeah, and I think someone like Allison Kay would be nice to add. We've talked about Layla Hirsch. Anyone who follows my Twitter account, it's basically turned into a Layla Hirsch fan account at this point. Like, I think she's fantastic. I wish they would sign her. I don't know if that's going to happen. But I don't know. And I wonder if they just keep using this idea that they're going to just keep working with NWA. Maybe they worked with Impact and do more women's matches with both of those in terms of having talent from different ones come in and do different stuff. But at the same time, we've said it, like, the NWA women's title feels like a bigger deal than the AEW women's title right now. And I don't know if that's just because of the way they feature it. Like, Thunder Rosa came back. We hadn't even said, like, Thunder Rosa is someone too who she gave a spark to when she's been on that TV for a while on Dynamite, had the match with Shida. Like, she gave a spark to, I think, that entire division. But
Yeah.
we know she signed with NWA, so like, what can you do, right? But I'm okay with that. Like, you don't have to sign everyone if you just find a way to maybe work with some of these others. It's not going to be a perfect scenario. Maybe at some point it's going to feel like it's leaning more towards giving NWA more than what you're getting out of it, just for being AEW. But I don't know. I wish that there were, like, that was going to be my thing, which we're going to do our Diamond of the Week and all of our superlatives later. But not having Sheeta on this show at all, like, it's an easy cop out to say, well, she didn't come on the show because she had such a tough match against Nyla, and we're just going to keep them both off because they're both recuperating from this difficult match. Well, Sammy Guevara got stuffed in a trash can after getting thrown over and speared into a table and all this other stuff, and he was back on the show. So I hope they don't go that route. But why not have your champion on the show, either in some, like, just give her some more character development. She has been champion for how long now? Like, it feels like months, like many months at this point. She's been the champion, and I don't know that they've done anything more with her from a character standpoint than they did when she first won the title. And that's where I think the frustration comes in. Is I know you only have this 2-hour block of TV every week on TNT. And that's why a third show is going to be so important. It's one thing doing it on AEW Dark. It's one thing doing it on your national TV audience that gets 800,000+ viewers. And I just wish they would capitalize on that a little bit more, invest a little bit more into it, whether it's a 5-minute segment, whatever you want to do. Just do something with your champion. And that's the one thing I would point out on this show, that I just felt like there needed to be something to move forward with Shida. And maybe they work to Shida versus Conti. I don't think it's going to happen because she's not rankings-wise in that position. Britt Baker wasn't on this show either. So I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure they know either.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. And we have Jonas in the chat echoing that sentiment, thinking that it's an exposure problem. That's exactly what it is. Jonas says that they have a lot of talent, but we just don't see it. More than one match on Dynamite, or put matches on Dark that aren't squash matches, and maybe we'll get a little bit further, but we just aren't there yet. Disappointing that she is not getting the love that she deserves, in addition to Nyla Rose, because that was another great match between the two of them over at Full Gear. We saw them work really well together when Shida initially won the title. And Full Gear, they just pull out all the stops again and quite a brutal match with the way that they were hitting each other. But nonetheless, that leads us into a Jericho promo, gathering up the inner circle before they head off to Vegas for the week. But Sammy Guevara coming in at the last minute saying, "Guys, I thought we were at the beach. I got the email that we were at the beach." But MJF apparently didn't send them the follow-up email saying that no, we're in Daly's place just like we always are, man. Obviously setting up some issues between Sammy and MJF that have been ongoing. We're looking into next week how MJF can put Sammy in a tough position again. But looking at Sammy versus MJF, this feud going further, what implications does this have on the dynamic between the inner circle?
Yeah, that's what we want to know, right? I just think there's so many ways you can go with this in terms of where they go from here. I've said it, I laugh about it. Future babyface star Sammy Guevara is going to be a joy to watch once he eventually gets there. We talked about it last week, Andy, in terms of that match where it felt like he was playing the babyface the whole time in that match until you had the Matt Hardy thing. And people were behind it. Like, they loved the guy just because of what he can do in the ring. And he's just got, the personality, I think, to make it work. So I assume at some point, I don't know when it's going to be. Maybe it's Revolution. We don't get to the match until then, but I feel like they maybe have to do it before then with MJF and Sammy. I just feel like that's something that they have to get to sooner rather than later, probably, just based on the interactions they've had with those two, because it really doesn't make sense for anyone else. You've already had Jericho, MJF. I don't know, like MJF Ortiz is not at this point, like, it's not a huge match, but
Right.
MJF versus Sammy, like, that's intriguing. And especially based on what happens next week in Vegas, I don't think what stays in Vegas is actually going to stay there this time. I think they're actually going to bring it back to Jacksonville, Florida. And I could see them doing, MJF versus Sammy at some point pretty soon, because I just feel like that's a big match. And I feel like that's another match where something's going to come out of it. We don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like that's the next big turning point in terms of the story of this whole thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm looking forward to Sammy versus MJF. A couple of young, great, fresh stars, and the way that they've worked off of each other the past couple of weeks has already piqued my interest. So I'm excited to see where we're at going forward. That leads us into another quick recap from a moment that happened at Full Gear. We had Kip Sabian slapping Orange Cassidy in the face, saying that his apology was not good enough. It's still game over for Orange Cassidy. Once again, this recap, instead of getting Sheeta on the show, I know we've driven it to the ground at this point, but I love Orange Cassidy, and I'm looking forward to Orange Cassidy and Kip Sabian next week. But I can't help but to think that this seems like a bit of a step down for Orange Cassidy after the feud that he had with Jericho and whatnot, and then the mini feud that he had with Cody. Still, I'm sure it's going to be wildly entertaining, just like everything that Orange Cassidy does is. I'd like to know what the people in the chat think about Orange Cassidy's current position and the ongoing feud between the best friends, and I'm gonna keep on calling them Game Over. That's their name in my mind. But what were your thoughts on this quick recap before we get into what we're really looking forward to tonight?
Yeah, I can't say I'm completely invested in this whole Miro and Kip thing anymore. Like, it was okay to start. At this point, I think I'm just sort of like, what's the next big thing? Like, and maybe this is it. Like, maybe the thing with, I don't know, with Orange Cassidy's it. I don't know. But I don't know. At some point, I'm just waiting for Miro just to destroy Kip and let that be that. But we still got a wedding to get through and all that, I'm sure, at some point. So I don't think it's going to top the recent weddings in wrestling history with Miro and his Bobby Lashley and Lana, and even the Impact Wrestling wedding recently between Rosemary and Johnny Bravo. I don't think you're topping that one unless somebody gets shot. So
I don't think this is leading into a potential murder mystery or anything of that nature.
No, I don't think so either, but you never know, I guess, in wrestling. But yeah, I don't know. I'm over this whole thing with Miro and Kip right now. I just don't feel like there's a whole lot of clear direction. I just feel like they're kind of there at this point. And as you can tell, Andy, by the way, you notice I'm wearing my Orange Cassidy freshly squeezed shirt. The reason I'm wearing this, here's another dud of the week. Well, we haven't gotten to it yet. Where was my guy John Silver? Like, he was not on this show
Where was
anywhere.
John Silver? God damn it! Okay.
Like, where was he? Like, he wasn't on this show. I think he's still upset that he lost in Gator Golf. He didn't win the championship. Trent's your first ever BTE champion, winning the Gator Golf title. John Silver, he had a chance, and I feel like he got screwed. I feel like if they would have continued this whole thing, continued the process, they would have had a shot at getting John Silver this title. But he's really just selling, I guess, this lost Orange Cassidy. And so I felt like I had to wear this shirt to be able to say, look, I get it. I wore my John Silver, Alex Reynolds shirt last week. I guess I'm going to give Orange his due here.
I don't want to give you a brain aneurysm, but we have Jonas in the chat that's saying Kip is a step up from John Silver.
Oh, Jonas. What? Okay, listen, Jonas. Here's the thing. You've been a great commenter, you really have. But I don't have control of the ban button, but I'm going to find out who does because, come on. You can't come in here with this anti-John Silver stuff. Johnny Hungy is one of the best things on TV right now, and I will continue to push that. But I'm just kidding, Jonas. You're great. Thanks for all the comments, and again, you're banned. You're out. See you later.
To my upstairs neighbor, if you're watching, I apologize for clapping my hands and yelling, "God damn it, where's John Silver?" I didn't exactly think that went through, but I got...
Maybe he's an AEW fan. Who knows? Maybe he is.
Hopefully. But that leads us into... guys, don't be mean to Jonas. Don't be mean to Jonas in the chat, guys. Come on. We're all friends here. We all love AEW.
Nice.
But that leads us in to our final segment of the night. We have Pinta versus Rey Fenix. But beforehand, we have Eddie Kingston coming out, cutting a short promo saying, yeah, he said he quits. But unlike you schlubs at home that would quit wrestling forever, he's going to keep on trudging on until he gets that World Championship. And he sits down for commentary for this amazing match. And a very interesting story was proposed throughout this match.
Yeah.
Eddie being blamed for the Lucha Brothers being driven further and further apart, the brutality between the Lucha Brothers, them ripping away at each other's masks, Eddie Kingston clearly taking Pinta's side. What did you think of the storytelling in this match? Because it was not the direction I thought that they would go. But by the end of the night, with what we saw, I couldn't have asked for anything more. My heart, I felt fulfilled as a wrestling fan by the end of this match. And by the way, let us know in the comments what you thought about Pinta versus Rey and what you thought about the huge surprise that happened at the end of this match.
Well, and that's funny because you and I were watching this thing, and like you heard me, like almost midway at 3/4 of the way through, it's like something clicked for me. I said, "Oh wait, like I know what it's gonna be now." Like I was just like the way they're doing this match, the way these guys were like trying to destroy each other, rip their masks off. Like this was brutal. Like these two, and that's what you expect from Penta and Fenix, right? They're gonna go at each other. They're brothers. The matches they've had, like they have been physical. They've had these moves, and some of these moves in this match, holy shit! Like they were insane with some of the things they did here. And of course the package, the pile driver on the apron, like you had all this stuff, the Panama Sunrise off the apron onto Fenix, like it was insane with what they did here. But the mask part, like that was where it's like, okay, this isn't just another wrestling match between these two. Like these two are trying to rip each other apart with these masks. And of course, as we know, like the masks are everything. You could talk about the Lucha Libre tradition all you want with the masks. Like we could be here for hours doing that. But like that was another element that I was not expecting to see. Like I never expected to see these two ripping their masks off almost to the point to where like their whole face is exposed, and we know how big of a deal that is in terms of Lucha Libre wrestling. Like that's a huge deal. But then, as we said, like almost through the match, I'm like, wait a second, this all makes sense. This is the main event. Eddie Kingston's out here on commentary. You've got all the elements you need for the big surprise, Andy, and that was what we got to. Great match, but the surprise, it was well worth the wait because this whole thing ties together so nicely. And we kind of said that last week when we saw the promo. We were like, it would make sense because these are his boys, and for him to come back, putting him against Kingston, it would make sense. And sure enough, that seems like where we're headed.
Exactly. And we had Tony on commentary just hammering in how disgraceful this whole situation was. Kingston immediately taking Pinta's side. Ken in the chat describing that Kingston was actually underselling the masks being ripped off. Oh, it's just part of competition. Oh, it's just part of the match. Yeah. Whereas Tony was freaking out over it.
Tony's great.
Some great work in this match by Tony. And then Jonas coming in saying back when it was FTR versus the Lucha Bros that it was a huge heel move for them to go for Rey Fenix's mask. And now with Rey Fenix and Pinta going for each other's mask, who knows if this relationship is repairable between the two. But yeah, we have Kingston coming out after the match after Pinta has just decimated his brother. Like you said, package pile driver on the apron followed by a destroyer on the outside. I was taking a note on the package pile driver to the point where I didn't even see the destroyer afterwards. I saw the aftermath, and then I had to ask you. I was like, did he just do another pile driver on the...
What's going on?
It was...
It's easy to miss with those two. Like, it's happened so fast. Like, it's so easy to miss things if you're not, like, just completely glued to it.
Exactly. But Kingston coming out afterwards, kicking Phoenix out of the ring, saying, we don't need him. And then, of course, we see the bastard plastered up on the Titantron. Pac coming out, looking like $1 million. I could you could use the space in between his abs to store your DVDs if you wanted to. He could be an entertainment center. That's how rugged and rigid he is. But it's crazy. Kingston versus Pac coming up. This was not a feud that I foresaw months ago, but now that it's right in front of me, I could not be more excited. What are you thinking about the future between these two? And let us know in the comments what you think is going to happen between Pac and Kingston. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe, by the way.
First of all, Andy, you know how AEW puts they put the quotes up there, like with some of the stuff they do, like media outlets? I want to see them put the quote up there. Andy Perez says Pac's abs are like an entertainment center. It's basically his own entertainment center. I want them to use that. 411mania.com. Everybody, like, just push that to AEW. Make sure they use that in their next little graphic that they do, because we would love to have the love there from them on that, because that's a great quote. But I mean, look, you've got two guys who are going to just completely destroy each other. And, like, this is what we want from Eddie Kingston matches. Like, Pac's coming back. He's been isolated. We played that up about how this guy is just ready to unleash holy hell on someone. And the fact that it's going to be Eddie Kingston, that makes it even much better, because these two, and you know, we were kind of having this chat as the match was going on about Eddie Kingston. We're like, okay, he loses his match against Moxley, but this guy, he can't go anywhere. Like, he can't, like, he's another one. We brought up FTR. Like, it's a similar situation. I mean, Eddie Kingston can work with anyone. Like, you could put him with anyone. It's going to feel important just because of his promos. But, like, this guy is a main event player. Like, he is someone who is going to stay in this realm because of what he can do with the promos, the way he can sell a match. Like, he could make it work with anybody. And the fact that you're going to have Pac on the mic here with Eddie Kingston, and these two building to just a complete blood feud, I feel like, knowing that, again, it's not just these two, right? It's you have Penta and Phoenix tied into this whole thing. So there's another one where you've got four guys into one storyline, and you could go different directions with how this plays out, because we've said it many times. It's no secret that AEW wants to make Rey Fenix like this next big singles type star, and I hate to see that, because I want to see the Lucha Brothers just tag up against anybody. But at the same time, like, we know what they're capable of as singles wrestlers too, and that's not even taken away. Like, Penta's pretty good too. Like, it's not just Rey Fenix. Like, Penta is very, very good. So there's a lot of ways they could go with this, but I'm excited for Pac and Eddie Kingston. Like, that's going to be pure brutality with those two.
Exactly, and we have Ken in the chat saying the exact same thing. Ken, as you've said it before, Pac versus Kingston, a masterclass in brutality. But whether or not Kingston or Pac are going to do going forward, they're probably not our wrestler. They're probably not our wrestler of the week. Neither of them were in
Yeah.
competition this week. What did you think? Who would you peg as your wrestler of the week this week? And make sure you let us know in the chat who you guys think is the wrestler of the week for you.
Man, it's a tough call because like I almost want to go like a different direction here and give it to Butcher and Blade, like and even the Natural Nightmares, like go with that whole group just for the brutality that they had in that match. But I can't go against Penta and
Mm-mm.
Phoenix. Like, and it's hard to pick between the two, but I feel like let's just like give them the co-winner of this award because just every time they're in the ring, they deliver. And I'm going to go with both of those guys. I know again they're a unit. They're a blood. So I feel like we can put them together as one here and pick Penta and Phoenix because that was another great match. But the thing is, it was sort of different from the one they had last time because you had the mask and all that stuff. So it's hard to go against that. That was quite a main event. Of course, it led to the storyline that we just talked about.
Yeah, Lucha Bros definitely took brutality to the next level, and they are definitely deserving of the Wrestler of the Week label. I'm not going to disagree on that. Jonas and Ken, both in the chat, also agree that Pinta and Phoenix are the Wrestlers of the Week. Just to
Yep.
add some variety, I want to give a shout out to Ty Conti as well. Just really
Yep.
putting on a clinic showing exactly what she is able to do at a large scale on this week's Dynamite. Hope to see more of her going forward. Hopefully, she will be a bona fide wrestler of the week one day. But moving forward,
Yep.
the wrestler of the week, without question, the Lucha Bros. Whether or not their match was the Diamond of the Week remains to be seen. What do you think this week was your Diamond of the Week?
It's a tough one too, but I am actually going to go a different direction with maybe than what people are going to think. I'm going to say the Kenny Omega promo I thought was better than what people will give him credit for because everybody talks about Kenny and his promos and all this other stuff. And look, he's not Eddie Kingston. Like let's call it what it is. Like he's not on that level. I don't think in terms of his promos. But I thought the way he sort of teased the thing with Moxley and like I've got to get out of here and all that, I thought that was pretty impressive in terms of how he tried to like sell the fact that they had never, like we said earlier, Andy, they've never had an official match. People wanting him to be the cleaner and all this other stuff, and he's talking about his Japan style and how people think that's left and all this other stuff. I thought it was a pretty nice promo, so I'm actually going to give it to him here for the Diamond because I think it's one that maybe wasn't expected. We didn't really know what it was going to be because sometimes Kenny's promos are kind of all over the place. But I thought this was actually a pretty good promo from Kenny, so I'm going to give him some love with the Diamond of the Week there.
Can't disagree with that. Very interesting choice. I'd have to go my Diamond of the Week, probably Pinta versus Rey Fenix, just because, obvious reasons. We saw a package pile driver on the apron
Yeah.
followed by a destroyer on the outside. Can't ask for much more when it comes to in-ring action or out-of-ring action, I guess. When it comes to Dud of the Week, we already have a couple predictions back down in the chat. Ken says just the overall lack of women's division progression tonight.
Yeah.
Can't disagree with that. Jonas says it would be Jade on the mic. What would you say your dud of the week this week is?
Well, aside from no Sheeta, I think that's the biggest one for me. No follow up, no character development, nothing. That's number one. No John Silver. That's 1B. So you got 1A and 1B there. Come on. That's my guy. You got to have him on there. But then I would go with that Cody thing. And it's so interesting because like on social media, like people were eating this up. Like they were like loving this. And I thought Brandy, I said earlier, like I thought Brandy like saved the segment. I thought she was the one that came out and her, just running this girl down. Like I thought that saved everything because up to that point, I was not into this at all. I felt like I was watching. It's gonna come across the wrong way, but like I feel like I was watching a bad WWE segment. Sorry, like we know, like it's a different company, and like that's some of the stuff we've seen before from them, though. Like it felt in that manner. And I expect like different stuff from AEW at times, as we know. Like I think that's what a lot of people look at and kind of see the differences between the two companies. And it's not me knocking WWE, but that feels like more of the stuff you get with that style. But I don't know. I just feel like that segment itself was probably the one that I would look at and say, I just feel like it didn't really do a whole lot for me. And as I said, if it leads to Cody versus Shaq, I 100% understand why they're doing it. It's good for business, like business-wise, it'll do great. But as a wrestling fan, like it's one of those things I think that I've just conditioned myself to where when you have these celebrity matches, we've seen so many of them before. There's like none that really just stand out for you, like over the top, perfect. So I don't know. I think that segment though, probably based on everything we saw on the show, I think that's probably far and away the choice for me.
Yeah, you took it right out from underneath me. That is my dud of the week as well. If I had to do a second dud of the week, probably just a Scorpio Sky versus Sean Spears match. It just didn't really do much for me. Not really a fan of the feud that they have set up right now. It didn't really pique my interest anymore. What they did in the ring, it was serviceable, but on a card like the card we had tonight, it just didn't stand up for me. Like we said, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle, and that leads us to did anybody else get lost in the shuffle over the past week or so? Because we had quite a shakeup in the rankings this week. For the first time ever, we have our rankings displayed here to the side here over at the stream so that our wonderful viewers can watch.
Yes.
So our viewers watching at home, make sure you let us know what you think about this week's rankings. We have Kenny Omega making his debut at number 1 in the men's division. MJF coming in close, number 2. Cody Rhodes, after dropping the TNT title, making an appearance on the list, number 3. Brian Cage dropping all the way down to number 4. And Ricky Starks finally showing his face on the list. What do you think about this set of rankings for the men's division, and how do you see these 5 men going forward?
Yeah, Taz finally got his boys in there, right? So good for him. They deserve it. I mean, as we said, like he brought up a good point last week. Like he was basically saying exactly the way anybody should have looked at it. So yeah, I like Cage and Starks being back in there. We know Omega automatically jumps to the top spot after winning the tournament, and MJF and Cody still in there. Although we know that Cody has no path to the championship if he's going to stay true to his word. So. I just like the fact that they did. They put Cage and Starks back in there, and that's good to see because their record proves it. Like these guys should be in there. And as we said, Taz was making great points. He wasn't lying. Everything he said was completely spot on. So now, they're being treated like the main event players they should be with Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. I'm really looking forward to see kind of what the next step is for them.
And it's interesting that they pop up right next to each other in the rankings this week. Obviously, some possible forward thinking into those two possibly facing off for a TNT title shot going forward. Who knows where that situation could go? But I feel like the big story is, of course, Kenny Omega being at the top of the men's division, where he would say he belongs, leading into his match versus Jon Moxley in just a few weeks. When it comes to the women's division, we have Ken with a hot take in the chat saying should Serena even count on the rankings considering she's already a world champion? If you can't read what's right on screen, we have Big Swole number 1, Nyla Rose number 2, Penelope Ford number 3, Serena Deeb coming in at number 4, and then Dr. Britt Baker all the way down at number 5. Like you said, Britt Baker was nowhere to be seen on this card. She seems like the obvious shoo-in for the next feud for Shida, but she has 4 other women in her way. How does Britt Baker get to number 1, and how does Britt Baker get her title shot against Shida? That's not only a question for you, Blake. We want to hear your fantasy bookings in the chat as well.
Well, I mean, I feel like they're just gonna put the match together in 2 weeks and say, here we go, like we're having it, right? I feel like that's, I don't know, like I feel like that's probably what's gonna happen, but I hate to keep saying that because I bring this up so much because like when I watch Dark, that's one of the things I'm always looking for. I'm like, all right, how many matches they have on here? They got 16 matches on Dark. They got 2 women's matches, and they get like a combined 8 minutes or something. And then you see people come along like Layla Hirsch. If you look at Dark, like last night, you had two come in and like Genocide and who was the Dream Girl Ellie. Like those were the 2 who were on Dark last night that were really impressive. And it's like I enjoy watching these talents come in like those and really, show off what they can do. But then I think about it, I'm like, I'm probably going to see them a couple times and then maybe they don't get brought back at all. And then, they go sign with someone else or they go do something else. And that's just, I think that's the frustrating part. It's like, you don't know what they're going to do next. And like when this women's division and you look at this rankings, I brought it up to you, Andy, as we were watching. I don't remember the last time Penelope Ford had a match. Like it's been a while. Like I want to say it's probably a month ago or
Hmm.
so. She's mainly just been kind of the side sort of prop, I guess, and she really hasn't done a whole lot in terms of this whole Kip Miro thing. Like she hasn't really been a huge part of it, except for the thing with Orange Cassidy where she slapped him or whatever last week. But I mean, I don't know. Like I don't know how they get to the next one. I just because again, I do think Sheeta versus Britt Baker is the next match they can have. It's not going to be Sheeta versus Big Swole. It's not going to be Sheeta versus Nyla Rose again. I don't think it's going to be Sheeta versus Penelope Ford. And again, Serena Deeb's the champion. Like, are they going to do a double champion type thing? I don't know. Like, I'm not against it. I will say that. Like, I'm not against them having Sheeta versus Serena Deeb because I think it'd be a great match. But I just don't. I don't know. Like man, this is so hard to predict week in and week out because I just don't know that they completely understand what they're doing each week with the women's division.
Yeah, that's the disappointing thing. There hasn't necessarily been a positive precedent set for the women's division for a path for Britt Baker to make it to the top because there just hasn't been great storytelling overall. We have a suggestion in the chat, Ken saying maybe a fatal four-way or five-way among the top contenders to determine who the number one contender of the championship should be. I would like to see that match. Big Swole, Nyla Rose, Penelope Ford, and Britt Baker going off in a fatal four-way to see who's the number one contender. It gives them something to
Yeah,
do, and hopefully they'd get more than 7 minutes to do it. But but that
yeah,
remains to be seen. We've been saying it for however long Dissecting Dynamite has been on the 411 network now. Britt Baker is the star of the women's division. It's just a matter of how she's going to get there. And that leads us into the tag team
yeah.
division to close off the night. We have FTR, of course, dropping out of the title picture to number one. We have Best Friends coming in number two, Natural Nightmares, Jurassic Express, and then Butcher and the Blade coming in to round that off at number five, maybe even dropping off the list after their loss this week. Who knows? But like we said, Natural Nightmares have been tearing up the tag division. They're due for a title shot sometime soon, but FTR, they still have a return match that should probably be happening sometime soon now.
Yeah, that's the thing is I'm very curious when they do that. And like we said, maybe they tie in the whole Revolution thing. They try to do that again at Revolution. That's still, several months away. But I feel like that's probably where they go next because the Natural Nightmares thing, like that feels like I love QT and Dustin, but that feels like a Dynamite, title match. I don't think that's a pay-per-view title
Definitely.
match probably for a lot of people. So yeah, it feels like that's where they go from here. And that's the thing too is now that you have the Young Bucks as your champions, AEW is one where you can do like face versus face and it works pretty well. You can't always do that, but like they can go up against a lot of these tag teams that are faces like Best Friends or, Jurassic Express. Like they could have matches against those and I think they would work out pretty well. But it does like, it feels like everything else is a far second, I guess, in terms of FTR at this point. Like you want to see the rematch, and I just feel like at some point they have to get to that. Like we said, I would like to have that match kind of have its time to be able to just have be kind of sit there for a while, but at the same time. I can understand why they would try to go back to it pretty quickly, just because it was such a good match. And again, I feel like any other match they have the Young Bucks with anyone else right now, knowing, that like Santana Ortiz, they're tied up with this MJF thing. Some of the others we talked about, like they're tied up with other stuff like Penta and Phoenix. Now, sure, I would love to see, the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros again, but based on everything that's happened, I just don't think we're getting back there to that either. So,
And we have Ken Hill getting the final word of the night in saying that maybe next week FTR is jumping Top Flight before or after their match with the Young Bucks. Whether or not that is in the FTR's cards remains to be seen.
yeah.
But next week on Dissecting Dynamite, we will be breaking down quite a show. It looks like we have OC, Orange Cassidy versus Kip Sabian. Looks like we have the Young Bucks versus Top Flight. We have Brian Cage and Ricky Starks versus Cody and Darby Allin. And ladies and gents, we are going to Vegas as well. So make sure you tune in next week on Dissecting Dynamite. Blake, any parting words, anything to plug?
Listen, bring back John Silver, bring back Hikaru Shida, and bring back the 411 on Wrestling Podcast on any podcast app that you use. How about that? That was quite a plug there. You can follow me on Twitter at WrestleBlake, which you've seen on the screen this entire time, because Andy is a wizard when it comes to video and everything he does. So yes, always enjoy it, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And ladies and gents, you heard the final word tonight. God damn it, bring back John Silver. We'll see you next week, ladies and gentlemen.